Hello, hello.
I think that's both of us.
Is that it?
Yep, and I think we are live. So apologies for any delay there. I'm not sure how good my connection will be, but we'll see how it goes.
Well, at least you're in the
So
trees now too. So
I am, and you've got some. I'm out in the car, so I at least match your backdrop a little bit.
yeah, I
Um,
mean matching hats, matching trees.
Gotcha. Okay, so everybody, welcome back to what is becoming, well, this is two now, so it's,
Yeah,
if not a series, certainly a recurring um, feature. Um, so yeah, Eric Way, News Column. Everybody knows you, I think. They hopefully know me from whatever
yeah,
they've let themselves in for subscribing to my channel. So we are back,
yeah.
and it won't be so NACS obsessed this week. We'll touch on that, I'm sure, but we are here to discuss the 7 automakers who have not given us a name for whatever they plan, but we will either come up with one on this, call it the Super 7, or who knows. But the basic gist of that will be that 7 automakers, and let's see if I can rattle them off. You can fill in any gaps. GM, Kia, Hyundai, Stellantis, BMW, Mercedes-Benz. Who's the 7th?
Oh man, now you're putting me on the
Good
spot.
names. Got them
Yeah,
here.
yeah. That's why I
GM,
googled.
GM, come on. GM's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah, okie dokie.
Oh, it was GM.
Yeah,
Was that?
GM.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So
So those they have committed to what is going to be at some point. We don't have a firm timeline, but 30,000 plus charges. This broke a little more than a week ago, so we're not breaking news here. But I don't think anything has really been added in the meantime.
uh,
I can also take a drink of water.
yeah. Well, I was gonna
Where do
say.
we
So
start?
you said, can you hear me? Sorry, Steve.
Yeah, I got you.
Oh yeah. I was gonna say you said GM twice, I think, but you might as
I said
well have. I
GM
think
twice.
it
Who's
was
the name of
it was it
this?
was Honda.
Honda. There you go.
Yeah,
Honda's
it
just
might
GM Japanese. As far
exactly.
as EVs go, they don't really
Yeah.
count. Just like Stellantis at the
Uh
moment.
oh. So yeah, London Broiler says he just bought himself a Tesla. So uh,
Oh man, there you go. You
yeah.
can't do that. You're the original Bolt EV Cannonball runner.
Boring.
He's been there, done. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry,
So yeah,
Steve. I kind of stole your role there. So
no problem at all. I think we've got all the automakers there. I mean, the facts are fairly thin on the ground. We don't have a whole lot of details. There are some interesting points that we'll come on to in terms of amenities. I think, what the combined weight of these automakers can do. It's quite interesting in the sense that it's some who've kind of committed to the Tesla connector, some who have really no EVs in the game yet. So that's quite a
right.
broad spectrum there. So I think we'll get onto that. I think we want to cover, what we can expect from the network in the next 12 to 24 months.
Yeah.
But give me your initial kind of take. I'll go on to mine in a little bit here, but I think, it'd be interesting to hear what your first take was and how those thoughts developed over the course of the last week or so.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, like you said, we're really kind of lacking in details, and all we know is sort of who's involved and what they're targeting, right? And I think to that 30,000 charger count, I think they're leaning very heavily on the NEVI funding, is what it sounds like. And one of my very first knee jerk reaction was, this sounds just like the original GM Bechtel deal. Because if you remember back, what is it, 3 or 4 years ago now, GM announced a partnership with Bechtel, which is one of the largest engineering and construction firms in North America, to build out highway charging infrastructure. And they said, we got all the data, we have all the plans, we know what we want to do, we just need investors. And they were just soliciting, and nothing that we knew of happened from it. And so it sounds to me that, who knows, maybe Tesla whetted the appetite with talking about opening up the superchargers, and then all of a sudden, and we've talked about this too, where the superchargers are great for a lot of automakers, but there's some that they just don't really work well for. And Hyundai and Kia in particular GM leaning more heavily on 800-volt architecture. So now all of a sudden you say, well, if the V3 supercharger network with their 20,000, or I guess technically 12,000 V3 or faster stalls in North America, if that's not serving their needs, but they are interested, we knew this, Hyundai was interested in joining a charging network. Now all of a sudden you have a plan to fall back on, and you say, hey, look, we can do this. Right, we can build a network of 30,000 chargers in North America that everybody can use. So, and benefits from in that 800-volt architecture space, which I think is really important.
Right. I mean, how much of this do you think is a hedge against the not wanting to leave everything in the supercharger network's hands? Not have to rely on that wholesale, as I mean, obviously this is a bunch of different automakers. It's not unusual. We've seen this, something similar with Ionity in Europe,
right,
and that seems to work fairly well. But obviously, over here we've only just got off the back of the breaking news of everybody, or significantly most automakers who are really prominent over here, committing or getting access to that supercharger network, as we made the distinction before, not committing necessarily, but getting access to those supercharger locations that are V3 and potentially V4 in future.
Well, I mean, I think to answer your question, I think it's an absolute hedge. And that's kind of, I think, what we talked about before with the Tesla network access, and what people, I think, overlooked when GM said they were joining, and Mercedes said they were joining, and Rivian too said they were joining. All three of those automakers are building out their own networks. So that Tesla supercharger access was itself a hedge. And I think this is another hedge on top of that. This is like you said, I think they know that the infrastructure, even with the superchargers, is nowhere near where it needs to be for a full population of EVs on the road. And I think they saw an opportunity, and then they're taking it. And then of course Electrify America is leaving that door wide open, right? Like, I mean, you and I think have had some pretty balanced experiences with Electrify America, but from what I've seen, I think our experiences pretty much reflect the fact that they have about a 70 to 75% charger uptime. So throughout the years, we've always been able to access chargers because not too many people were using them. But now that everybody's using them, a 70 to 75% charger uptime is not good enough. And not
one charger down makes the 3 stall count just not.
So I think to your point, I think this is a huge hedge by these automakers. It's an opportunity, I think, that they see. And then don't forget others like I said, EVgo and then ChargePoint are still also building out. So there's a lot of options out there beyond this. But sorry.
Let me pause here quickly, just to say welcome to everybody. So we've said hello to the London Broiler. Congratulations on your Tesla. But thank you for all the work in the Bolt previously.
Yes.
Dusty Dixon, what can they do different? We'll definitely come on to that, I think, very soon here. Robin Danbury, hello. Good to see some New England in the live chat here. Dusty is in Houston, Texas with an Ioniq 5. All right, we have similar. And then we've got California. So you got somebody out there as well. Mini SE and a Mitsubishi i-MiEV. Those are going to be, I don't know if you're who I think.
Or TK Media.
Yeah, do I know you on Instagram? I've seen some epic i-MiEV road trips out there. Those are a lot of fun. Don't know if that's you, but if it is, give us a thumbs up down there. And then London Broiler is down in South Carolina. So we are well represented here, I think.
And Leonard, hi.
So I'd be interested as we kind of, progress the conversation. I'll try and jump back to the comments, but let us know if you're already watching, what your initial take was on this. I'll just say mine was almost not underwhelmed, but I found it hard to get excited initially, other than the Hyundai Kia aspect. And the fact that, this will be at least in the next 12 to 18 months, starting to see fruition, which is, good, not bad, obviously. I find it, I think there's a fairly steady drumbeat of infrastructure news now. There's quite a lot out there, and obviously jumping on each one is important. But I found a lot of the coverage was just like kind of as we are now, trying to pass. It's all speculation, really. We don't really know much more than the biggest piece of it, which is the 7 automakers that jumped into it, and the fact that it provides that kind of secondary competition piece, that they will bring a lot of weight and influence to bear, creating this alternate take, on the supercharger network. So I think probably what we'll get into is what will they prioritize. We wanted to kind of talk about what do they need to prioritize, where will they want to go. Certainly they've talked about metro areas and highway corridors, but that could be a lot of different things. What's your first kind of take on that? Yes, it's great to have another network, but the location is kind of key at this point.
Yeah, and I think, and that's because you had talked about they made the comment, Dusty had made the comment about what are they going to do differently, and I think there's a huge trust issue, right? Just based on what we've seen with a lot of these networks and their build out so far, and what are they going to do differently? Because that they know better, right? Like I think you and I have been preaching, yelling till we're blue in the face about all the things that they could be doing better, and they just haven't been. And that's why I see some promise in what they've talked about, because they did talk about some of the pain points about not having canopies over the chargers, not having services immediately in the vicinity of the chargers, no squeegees, no trash cans, that sort of thing. So they're getting off on the right foot in terms of they're saying a lot of the right things. And I think one thing that I want to give you credit for, and I mean, I know I do a lot of theory crafting, but I try to do this very same thing, is you and I are very much more interested in what's actually in the ground. You can talk about what you want to talk about, but if we can't pull into that charger, plug our car in, and showcase what's actually going on, at least for me, it's of a lot less interest, right? I mean, I'll give feedback and I'll do all of this sort of, they need to put chargers here or there, or locate them in this certain way, or orient or format the site in a certain way. But it's really important to me that there's actually a site there in the first place. And that hasn't necessarily happened. We've seen a lot of talk from a lot of different companies, and they just haven't necessarily executed the way we wanted them to. But like I said, saying that, I think they said a lot of the right things. And in terms of they want interstate travel corridors, they want full pull-through parking, they want it located near services that are useful to travelers with amenities on site, canopies over the chargers, all of that sort of thing. So they're saying the right things, and that's where I think a lot of people are justified in their concerns about how well they'll execute. So if we want to do a little bit of ping pong, Steve, I'll throw this back at you. Nobody knows who their hardware providers are. So I have a top three, but I want to hear from you who you think their charging hardware providers might be, who they might be going to, and just maybe concerns or thoughts on that front.
Yeah, my connection may be hanging a bit here, so I'm gonna see how it goes here. I may have to move inside, but yeah, I think it's it's hard to separate out. I don't actually think they know a whole lot about this at the moment. I don't have a feel that they've thought out much beyond the press release and the initial kind of how they'll get together.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I think you might be freezing, Steve. You might be freezing. So, yeah, hopefully Steve joins us in a minute, but and I'll catch him up. So my three thoughts, right, about the yeah, about the hardware provider. So we're seeing like not BTC Power, not Signet or Afasic.
Yeah, see, I've had great times with the new EVgo Signet hardware.
Mm-hmm.
Those have been rock solid for me. They've saved the day a couple of times on this last trip we've just done. The Signet kind of having problems with Electrify America, I know is they've certainly had some of the surge kind of problems, but again, even those locations, I think if you're not watching it laser focused on the what the charger is doing, I've come back to a charge car all the time. So my general, approach so far has been to, people, the layman, if you see that it's got a black cladding on the side, at least with Electrify America, it's probably going to give you a good charge. So yeah, I'm in Submit's camp at the moment. Efosec, I think, are a relic of the past. I don't know if they'll ever be back. Chempower, I think you made a good point, has they've got a lot of hype. They've certainly proven themselves in Europe, but I don't know that, until anyone has hardware in the ground here and some track record of delivering, Tritium does seem like a good bet. They've certainly positioned themselves to be, manufacturing here and in a good place to comply with NEVI requirements, which I know that one of the things in the press release was, they're going to comply or exceed the spirit and requirements of NEVI. So those pieces are, I would certainly think Tritium, Chempower could be an outsider. I think they've got to prove themselves and have some kind of track record before they can really. But everybody is now establishing that base of operations and manufacturing in the US, right? So whoever, there's going to be a crunch. There's going to be so many initiatives at the moment of trying, other than Tesla being able to, roll out their own hardware. Everybody has to get up to speed in manufacturing to deliver on these sites, whether it's a pure NEVI site, whether it's an EVgo that was planned already, that is now going to access NEVI funding, whether it's one of these 7 automakers. So they have to, and then you've got a bunch of others. One of my things was Mercedes-Benz had already announced. This is why it's so hard to kind of stay on top of these things, because they had announced some form of network before. So is this now just going to amalgamate with that? Are they still going to have their own thing that's maybe more dealership based? And, I think there's a lot of these. We've started to see. I'm visiting dealerships now just to see what they've got in the ground. Mostly it's CPU 250s, so they're going with that. But those must be mostly now for dealership use, plus make a little money on the side, because I don't think anyone really wants to go to a dealership in plan A of their charging, at least.
Right, exactly. I think I'm on that weird dealership kick where I think it's great that they have DC chargers for customers, things like that, show them how to use it, but it's not exactly a place that I would want to stop if I need to charge someplace. That's sort of like last on the list. So I think those CPE 250s are perfect for that 100, 115, 125 kilowatt, if maybe the newer ones, right, up to maybe 100. They say 160, I think it is, but I'm yet to see those out in the wild too. But I think those are fine for dealerships. But while we're on that subject, so I think you're right. That's a good question about Mercedes, whether they're going to continue their network build out. I think they have to, just like GM with EVgo and the Flying J partnership. I think they're going to continue with that as well. I don't think this is going to impact that in any way. But that's kind of leading into my thoughts on who the hardware providers are going to be. So Mercedes decided to go with ChargePoint, and they might actually be the front runner with their ChargePoint Express, right? So those are base 200 kilowatt, but doubled up to 400 kilowatt chargers. And that's kind of an important number too to keep track of, because one of the spokespeople for this charging alliance had mentioned 400 kilowatt charging. So initially 350 kilowatt release with a 400 kilowatt eventually down the road. And so far we have only seen 2 hardware providers actually put out tested, proven 400 kilowatt chargers, and that's ChargePoint and it's Delta. And so those are my 2 front runners. And I have mixed feelings about Delta only because of the charger activation time. So in speaking with EVgo, they said it's a limited amount of things that they can do to make that hardware start faster. And I know they think, it's not a big deal. And with auto charge, it's especially not a big deal. But it's something that's getting measured. It's getting measured by people on the road. It's getting measured by the industry. And so if a Tesla supercharger boots up in under 10 seconds and a ChargePoint boots up in 10 to 15 seconds, and your Delta charger is booting up in 45 seconds to a minute, sometimes more than a minute if there's slow connection, that's a real problem. Even if you have something on the screen saying, oh, connector 1 now in place, connector 2 now in place, that might look cool like at the beginning, uh, but it gets old really, really fast. And I think anything more than 35 to 45 seconds for charger activation is problematic. So Delta has, they're great units. They're providing that high power, but that activation time is just way too long. And so ChargePoint Express, on the other hand, very fast activation times, and hopefully 400 kilowatt charging power. But my dark horse in this race, and I don't know if you're moving, Steve, if you just logged out, my dark horse in this race is actually Lincoln. So Lincoln, for those of you who know about welding, they do a lot of the DC welding devices, and they've been wanting to get into DC charging equipment and putting in factories and trying to get that into place. So I don't know about that. Like, I think Delta might be, I think ChargePoint and Delta are more likely candidates for this network, but I like the idea of a new charging hardware provider like Lincoln, who, like I said, has a huge amount of industry experience building DC power units, industrial power with, usage, both like commercial, private sector, indoor, outdoor. So like if I were to go with any company sight unseen for charging hardware that hasn't been deployed yet, it would be a company like Lincoln. So those would probably be my top three, with, like I said, my biggest concern being if it's Delta, those slow activation times really need to improve. They have to do something to cut that easily in half on the hardware side. And if they do that, then I think those would be competent units as well. So
that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think it would help to have more of these start to come in. It'd be interesting to see some different providers who haven't had a track record in the US just start to prove themselves. And this is a great place to start, right? With so many potential automakers funneling their vehicles this way, because that's a piece of it we haven't really touched on. That this will enable some of these automakers to build this into the vehicle, right? I mean, you've obviously got the experience with the Bolt, and we've had that. Hyundai has just added EV route planning, but it is dog awful. It's not to be used by your everyday folks. I think Polestar have had some decent track record in that area, but obviously you're not getting Volvo in this yet. So it's going to be potentially a good addition to that routing. But again, you've got so many different options now. They're going to have to factor the superchargers into that. They're going to have to, will they prioritize the network that they're going to build out here, even in its infancy, when it's kind of going to have, tens of locations rather than hundreds and thousands. So it's going to be interesting to see how that develops, but it's a big piece because at some point here we move beyond the people who are excited to plug their destinations into a better route planner and deal with the vagaries of that app, and who just want frankly the Tesla experience of plugging in your destination and having it tell you where to go, even if that does have the deficiencies that we know it has with stopping too early, telling you to charge for too long, right, all kind of stuff. But some people don't want to deal with that,
Yeah, and I think it's kind of important when we look at this, we take it a step back from a big picture perspective and say, if we have 30,000 of these chargers in from this charging alliance, and we have 2,000 to 3,000 sites from EVgo and 2,000 to 3,000 sites from ChargePoint, and what are we up to now? 10, 12, 15,000 sites from I guess chargers, but not sites, right? Like, I guess 1,500 to 2,000, up over 2,000 supercharger sites. You start to get to the point where you don't really need a route planner unless you really want one, right? Because if you know that every Flying J has EVgo chargers at it, if every Buc-ee's has it's superchargers at it, right? You can now sort of travel with this confidence. And I think the problem I've always had with those route planners is they're about the car and not about the passengers. They're not about the trip, right? So a supercharger navigation is going to tell you to stop for 5 minutes in Kettleman City and drive for an hour and then stop for 5 minutes and, you know, like at the base of the Tehachapis. And it's like, is that how you really want to travel? And I don't know that it is for a lot of people. So, but to your point, a lot of these cars, you know, the GM cars in particular, have their route planners built in, their preconditioners built in. So are they going to be prioritizing, or are they going to get smarter and say, oh, you're towing a trailer? We're going to eliminate every charging site that doesn't have full pull-through parking. And that's going to knock a lot of these off the list. So I don't know. We'll see how that goes. But I was going to mention too pace, because EVgo recently announced that they opened their 230th GM partnered site. So all of their GM partnered sites are 350 kilowatt.
Mhm.
So that's 230 sites that they opened in a little bit more than a year and a half, which I don't know. What do you think about that number? Do you think is that pacing too slow?
I mean, I think it will be, depending on what else is built out, but that has essentially replaced the Electrify America pace. You know, they were on that kind of cadence of 200 to 300 a year for the first 3 years, really, until they hit that, you know, reliability snafu last year. Snafu is probably understating it, but you know, we you know, we've talked about that plenty, and you know how it may be overblown in some cases, but certainly they have, whatever the reality on the ground, they have shifted their focus at Electrify America from installations and activating new sites to making sure the old ones either have upgraded hardware or regular maintenance visits. And we've seen that a lot over the trip that we just took. You know, a lot of maintenance workers out there, or people who had visited just now, or just recently. But you know, they obviously halted because they since then they've been stuck on that kind of around 800 stations. Maybe it's gone up a little bit, gone down a little bit because some have come off. But EVgo has taken up the mantle there because, you know, I was very, very vocal about criticizing EVgo's, you know, pretty horrendous presence around New England for the last 12 months before we hit this year. You know, someone asked in the comments about the mass pike chargers that have been pulled out, and a lot of that old equipment is going away. But at the same time, they've started opening up a lot of new sites. So when an old site has gone offline and maybe left people in the lurch a little bit, admittedly, it hasn't replaced the mass pike because that's kind of a specialized location that you can't really replace as easily. But the new equipment has been outstanding for us. You know, anytime Electrify America has been backed up, congested, or just, you know, a site that you really don't want to visit because of the location, the EVgo, whether it's in Chicago, we had them up here, down in DC, they've all been excellent. And that pace has really helped out. You know, it's taken up some of the slack that Electrify America has left, and they've been rock solid so far. Of course, you have to have the continuity, right? You have to then take that great start and keep those stations maintained and online.
Right.
That's where the rubber meets the road in this.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know, like for this network though, to me that pace might be slow. Right. So I think of what was it, Tesla, they were saying, now they always mix global and North American numbers, but they were opening a new supercharger site like every 11 hours or something like that. And I don't think that there needs to be that level of a pace for this, but I think 230 sites in a little over a year and a half, you know, since the inception of that partnership, I think is maybe a little bit slow. Like I said, that flying J pilot build out, I think if they don't at least double that rate, so 400 chargers between now and maybe this time next year, or 400 charging sites between now and this time next year, I'd be a little bit disappointed in EVgo. With this charging alliance, though, that's a big question because 30,000 chargers is a lot. And one of the things that I always try to balance when we're looking at charging providers is, you know, coverage versus concentration. And that's a big question mark that we have right now. So for those of you who don't necessarily follow my charging site reviews, when I refer to concentration, I'm referring to how many chargers there are per site or how many powered stalls there are per site. So with coverage, if you're going to build one site every 150, 200 miles like Tesla does, then your site concentration needs to be really high, because you're basically saying you are going to stop here on your route. And we've seen that from Tesla. But whereas someone like Electrify America, they've only been building 4, 6, 8, 10 chargers per site, but they have pretty dense coverage. When you look at, there's like an Electrify America site every 25 to 30, maybe 40 miles on a freeway. So we don't know where this charging alliance is going to fall in that spectrum, right? But I think, I'm still, even now, I'm still of the opinion that anything more than about 12 charging stalls per site, I would rather see you just add another site nearby. So don't do a 24 charger site. Don't do a 36 or 48 or whatever. Just build a second site nearby. I think, Steve, you and I have talked about this offline. I don't mind having 2 charging sites in the same retail shopping plaza. Mm-hmm. Some people are not going to want to walk from a Burlington coat factory to the Nike store, right? Like if it's on the other side of the complex. So why wouldn't you also consider building multiple charging sites? Maybe not the same provider, but have that mentality where you can have multiple sites off the same exit. We're even seeing Tesla start to do this now too, which is nice, that there's this redundant charging infrastructure even off the same freeway exit. And so with this charging alliance, we just don't know how that's going to work out, what their site sizes are going to be and what their site distributions are going to be. And so I'd hate to say, I want to see them building 200 sites, every quarter of the year. If those are 30 to 40 charger sites, that might not be reasonable. But if they're only 10 charger sites, then I would definitely want to see them building at least 200 per quarter. In terms of just every 3 months, I would like to see at least maybe 175 to 100 sites going on every month, online every month.
Well, this is the kind of where the real issue, John, rises up, right? If they're going to, I think EVgo's problem always was they were the largest public provider, even when Electrify America was building out a pace, but they had all of those stations, age aside, in cities, metro areas. So even if you wanted to talk about, traveling across the country, Electrify America was the only option. So that, I think we have to get a lot smarter now, because previously just putting units in the ground was enough, because everybody needed something. They needed to serve cities. So EVgo was great for that. They needed to get a cross-country route, public charging wires. So Electrify America served that need. But now we're starting to get into, right, where are the remaining gaps? And eventually those are going to be filled fairly quickly, whether it's state funds from, still lingering from Dieselgate, looking at you, New Hampshire. The Flying J,
West Virginia.
Got stories about them too. The Flying J pilots obviously starting to serve some of those routes that were interstate minded, and and then Rivian as well. We just did Shenandoah, so there's the Skyline Drive there. It's about 100, just above 100 miles of mountain roads, so you can get it's slow, but you still need to have chargers at either end. So with Electrify America, you do, because they serve I-81, which is relatively close. But Rivian was the most notable there. If we had been able to plug into them, you're only essentially 5 miles, 10 miles off the end of north and south on that Skyline Drive. To be able to just charge up your car, go in with a full, pack, and come out the other end if you wanted to do it all in, 3 or 4 hours, as a gas car would. So there are charges along the way. There's level 2 stuff, but Rivian was the most notable. Not that we could use it at this point, but again, they will come into the mix at this time next year, most likely. They're not going to sit idle. They're going to start to generate extra revenue, and having hundreds of sites. I think there's maybe 40 or 50 live at the moment, or close to going live. They're going to be in some interesting places, and kind of a proposition that others at the moment don't match for these adventure remote networks, that kind of thing, or remote locations. So I think that starts to come into how with all of these potentially competing providers, if you have a choice, as you say, if there is redundancy and concentration of different providers at that location, leaving aside free charging and all the things
Right.
that eventually kind of, dissipate, what is the core brand proposition of those charging networks? And that's where I think we start to get into, obviously, location, obviously,
Hmm.
reliability, but also amenities, the kind of things that we were talking about with canopies, 24/7
Right.
restrooms, squeegees, a bunch of things that, Electrify America and EVgo, most of them really at the moment, don't typically offer.
Right. And I think something that plays into this too is when you're building out a network. Tesla is a good example of this because they built such an integrated network serving the needs of their customers specifically. But GM, right, is building these very long range vehicles. So you can say what you want about, oh, the Silverado EV doesn't need that big of a battery, but if you're traveling in a vehicle that can go 400 to 450 miles at freeway speeds, the way you travel in that vehicle is going to be very different than a Hyundai Ioniq, where maybe you're going to go 200 miles between charging stops and you're going to have a 15-minute charge, whereas that Silverado, you're going to have a 30-minute charge. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see how these different, I think Mercedes is another good example of it. You have these cars going 400 miles, but they're going to need about 30 minutes to charge up to 80%, even on a 350 to 400 kilowatt charger. So as an automaker, are you now framing this network around the way you expect your customers to be traveling with their EVs? So I think that's gonna probably play into it a lot too. So I think it's a really good question, is just to what, how this is going to play out in the next few years. And I was going to say, I wonder if we're going to be remiss in not mentioning Walmart, right?
Yeah,
Walmart said,
yeah.
hey, yeah, we host EVgo, we host Electrify America, but we want our own charging network.
Yeah, and I think this is where it starts to get into it. They've I just visited a site from a local convenience store chain, Giant Eagle, who are launching Get Go chargers at some of their locations. So there's a lot of this regional stuff as well. Um,
Mhm.
it just starts to become, there's a point where all of this there will be stations where you need them, right? And you won't
Mhm.
be thinking about it as much. As maybe there will be brand loyalty in the same way that there's brand loyalty for X% back on your purchase or some discount at their convenience store, or that will all be to come. But at some point there will be charges everywhere, and what's going to make a difference is whether the manufacturers are pushing anyone in any particular direction. I mean, do you think it's going to go the route of kind of gas stations where they just people just go to the one that is most convenient, or do you think there will be manufacturer tied detail
I,
forever?
I mean, I realize that I'm probably projecting here a little bit, but I personally think it's going to be more of the gas station model. I think more and more people, as they get comfortable with EVs, we already know that range anxiety is just made up. It's not a real thing. It's charger anxiety. It's, I have a 200, 250-mile EV. Am I going to be able to make it to the next charger? And if I do make it to the next charger, is it going to be working? Is it going to be full? Whatever. I think you're going to see both of those things melt away because you're going to have ubiquitous charging from a dozen different networks. But once that happens, I think you're going to see EV owners start to fall more into that gas station model. Now, it's going to be different, right? Like I said, maybe you go to Buc-ee's because you want to pick up their brisket while you're charging, but it's going to be that same sort of play. It's going to play out that same sort of way where maybe I need to get some camping gear. Walmart's just as good as anything else. REI is just as good as anything else. In fact, I would prefer to charge at that location. And so I think we're going to see less about the charger affiliation and network affiliation and more about the locations. So if EVgo happens to be at an In-N-Out, I might be stopping at an EVgo charger, right? So I think that's the mentality that we're going to start seeing more and more from EV owners, is not having to cater their trip to the car that they're driving or the network that they plan to use. And I think that is ultimately where we want to be anyway. So, like you said, Rivian, right, going up Shenandoah.
They were perfectly placed. And aside from the fact that I almost got struck by lightning as I tried to cover their installation down in the south end, it was a really good place to be. I would have loved to plug in.
F-150?
What's that?
F-150 Lightning? An F-150 Lightning.
Oh, well, if I'd been hit by one of them, I think I would have known it, and I wouldn't have been on this live stream. But yes, I'm sure they were pulling up, hoping that it's just a truck thing and they can just charge as well. I'd be remiss at this point, though, because you did make a good point about buying camping gear, all the supplies you need. Brian Ribby did an excellent video on top 5 road trip tips, which brought up that exact thing. Don't do the shopping trip for your camping. And we just had this. My wife goes to Walmart, takes longer to do the shopping with the kids than I do to charge. So I feel like feather in my cap for Hyundai there. But that video is up on his channel. I'll actually post the link when I get a chance here.
I want to see that. Yeah,
really good stuff. Lots of it's quick to the point, and it's epitomizes family travel, right? That's if you can do that shopping trip, that's one thing you're not doing once you get to the campsite. You've already got the supplies, and as long as you can fit it in the car, which has been our biggest challenge, you can actually use the charger time to not even be really a charge stop. So that's a good kind of crossover there. So let me jump to the comments here whilst I catch up. So we had talked about, is there a limitation on the grid side of how many sites can be placed in an area, thinking small towns off the highway? I mentioned FreeWire briefly, but Leonard did point out the kind of thing that was in the back of my head. The reliability there has been a bit up and down, because I know they did that in Utica. One of the Evolve New York sites uses FreeWire, and the Evolve New York reliability has been pretty good, but that one has been down more than others. I want FreeWire to do very well, but that does seem to have been some issue on that side. What do you think about the grid limitations on some of these locations?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I, with GM's affiliation, what do you think the potential for Hydrotech being involved? Because we've already seen this from some of GM's press releases. They showed a charging fueling hub with Hydrotech hydrogen fuel cell technology also feeding into that power. And so one of the things that I think in the Midwest especially, right, where you have those power outages, and a lot of people talk about solar and wind, but you have long periods of time where renewables aren't available, but then periods of time where you're just blasted in the face with all that excess energy, where something like hydrogen would be a huge power sink to absorb all of that. I wonder if we're not going to see, because of that connection, GM sort of feeding in with their Hydrotech. We already know Honda has interest in hydrogen as well. And that could do a lot to offset the grid if you have fuel cell stacks co-located with these chargers that will offset some of that grid, the stress on the grid. Obviously, batteries are another option too. I had mentioned Delta when I reviewed, and I didn't realize they even did this, when I reviewed that ChargeNet site, the really nice one with the tritium and the solar canopies at the Taco Bell in South San Francisco. They had a Delta battery, same company that makes the Delta chargers for EVgo. So there are all these grid tie battery options, hydrogen fuel cell options. Even like FreeWire does their integrated charger with the battery in it, and that really helps with those low power connections. But personally, I think discrete batteries separate from the chargers is maybe a better path if you're going to go that route than what FreeWire is doing. Just from a reliability standpoint too, the charger can go down, but at least the battery is still up and maybe feeding other chargers.
Yep.
So I think they have plenty of options, but given what they're talking about doing too, you are definitely going to run into that issue with those rural areas where there just isn't the power that you need. at the sites where people are going to be stopping and refueling their EVs. So, but I think there are options. I'm just kind of curious to see how they end up doing it, because they seem to be wanting to take lessons from everybody, including Tesla, in how they're deploying their superchargers. And that's one thing Tesla's been very good about, is those mobile megawatt charging packs with chargers hooked up to them as well. I could see this charging alliance doing something similar.
Mm. It's an opportunity to demonstrate tech as well, right? The next level, because we don't want to be stuck in replicating what everyone else has done before, as we start to get just constant lines of EVs trying to use these things.
Right.
Those locations in particular are going to be key. I think of like Utah and Green River. Coffee out there, the place I want to visit, but it feels like someone needs to buy that business and make it kind of the oasis in the desert of EV charging.
Well, yeah, you and I can meet in the middle, right?
Does that count as the middle? I feel like you get the easier deal though.
Promontory, Utah, yeah, maybe.
Somewhere in Kansas, I feel is, but no one really wants to
maybe
meet in Kansas. So I'd rather meet you in Utah. Alrighty, what else have we got? Thank you for all the questions and comments, everybody. It's useful to kind of have the extra thoughts in here and jump off onto those now and again. I think it's kind of a side issue, but it does run simultaneous, and I have some kind of thoughts on AC charging and overnight charging. We can't go coast to coast if we talk about that, even meeting in the middle in 24 hours, right? You need to stop. You need to have these places where you can get a reliable overnight charge. I found that more difficult at the moment. Maybe the previous trips I've done where I've got used to destination charging have been in places that were more suited to it, but going out to even to Minnesota, and some of the areas that had cities, I found it quite hard to find destination charging. It was still DC charging and then going to the hotel, which defeats the point of the overnight stay as far as, I think about it. It feels like a wasted opportunity, at least. So how do you feel, is there any remit for these, projects that are obviously laser focused on fast charging to kind of supplement some of those efforts with AC charging, or should that be a completely separate program from hotel providers, campsite providers, people who are suited to it?
Yeah, I'm actually fairly strongly opinionated on this, and it's funny because I've seen a lot of people in the Tesla community, and I wouldn't be surprised within like the EGMP community as well, where once you have cars that are charging to 80% in 15, 20, 25 minutes, they say, well, what's the point of AC? Even as a destination charger, what's the point of AC charging? I don't need to be bothered with it at a hotel or motel, because I can just stop at a DC charger and I'll get the same thing out of a 20-minute stop. But I look at it differently, and one of the reasons is not everybody's going to have a 3C charging EV. But then I think one thing a lot of these charging providers forget about is they're putting these charging sites at business locations. There are people who work there, right? And that's something that I feel like is a problem within the EV community right now. And it's something that as someone from a rural community, I'm very sensitive to, is these rural communities are very much overlooked. It's just, they used to be flyover, now they're stopover, however you want to look at it. And I see these EV owners standing aloof next to Electrify America chargers at a Walmart in the middle of nowhere in the countryside. And I think they forget that people live there and people work at those locations. And one of the most convenient things that you can do is provide workplace charging. So if you're going to put a charging location at a Walmart, at a Safeway, at a business, right, at a grocery store, you should be adding some number of AC chargings to that location, even if it's a travel charger. People work at travel plazas. If I work at a Flying J or a Buc-ee's or something, I want to be able to drive an EV too. I don't want to take a DC fast charger if I'm going to be there for 4 to 6 to 8 hours working my shift. Why can't I also have that opportunity?
Mhm.
And then, of course, we also see that the reliability of AC charging is much higher than anything that you're going to see in the DC world, even in the Tesla supercharger realm. And having that added cushion of I'm never really stuck, there's always an AC charging option here, that's huge to me.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm a huge proponent of making sure even these travel sites, these dedicated travel sites, have at least some level 2 AC availability on site.
For sure. Yeah, I think we're of one mind there. I didn't really consider it so much from the worker perspective, but I think that's another. They're kind of becoming the Swiss Army knife of charging. You know, they're cheap to install relatively. They're reliable. It's very rare that you see a full bank of these things go down.
Right.
Workers, of course, but if you also, there's been a few occasions where we've pulled up and the chargers, all the fast chargers have been busy. Maybe it's only 5-10 minutes, but it would be nice to plug in at that point. Maybe you only need 10-20 miles, and you do have shopping to do. So maybe in that instance, there's a lot of these instances where you could get enough, especially with the the more capable level 2 chargers now being around that 10-11 kilowatts.
Right.
A decent chunk of change over the course of a shopping trip or something like that. So for that reason, plus the fact that they're cheaper and potentially easier on the battery, all these things, they really serve a lot of purposes for not a great deal of extra expenditure.
Right. And I think that's the key point that you brought up, is it's such a low cost for such a huge benefit. The cost, the cost benefit. There's a reason the average EV owner does not install a DC fast charger at their home. Right.
Yeah. And when they're at hotels, I kind of feel like there's one in Herkimer which we have history with, but we stay at that Red Roof occasionally, and it feels like I think you can actually now go down and use one of the park and rides to level 2 charge, which I may do the walk for, but it feels like a waste because you really don't want to tie up that charger to 90-95%. Even if it is quick, and you have to stay with the car. Really, I want to just be plugging it in, forgetting about it, and waking up to the 100%.
Right.
And that even though it's a free charge on Electrify America, I'd happily pay for a little, the convenience of just letting it do its thing and knowing that it's on level 2 instead.
Exactly. So
for sure. All right. Did we miss anything else here?
So the only one thing I wanted to mention is just about because that spokesperson did mention the 350 kilowatt to start and then 400. And I don't see this talked about enough because I think not enough people are talking about how it actually works, right? So when the Electrify America chargers or EVgo chargers are 350 kilowatt chargers, they can provide 500 amps of current, which is important for certain vehicles, but they also have a cap. And so usually it's about 700 volts. So the charger can go up to 920 or 1,000 volts, whatever that rated charger is, but it doesn't have enough power modules to supply 500 amps past about 700 volts. That's why it's rated as a 350 kilowatt charger. So really what it sounds like they're doing is they're initially doing 350 kilowatt, and they'll eventually be adding more power modules to whatever it is, whatever chargers it is that they're using, so that they can still supply 500 amps even past that 700 volt threshold. Because on paper, in theory, EVgo or ChargePoint, Electrify America's 350 kilowatt chargers, on paper, they could do 500 kilowatt today and still be within all of their ratings. They just don't have sufficient power modules to do that. And so that it sounds like that's where they're going with this network, is they're going to expand the power modules and start creeping up to 400. And I wouldn't be surprised to see 450 or 500 kilowatt eventually at some point in the future.
So how much do you think we need that? Because I have to admit, maybe it's still I'm living the charmed life, coming away from the Bolt and jumping straight to an Ioniq 5. I feel like I don't need much faster. I mean, maybe you could shave 5 minutes off it for interstate stops, but honestly, I welcome those 15-minute breaks, and I'm more often than not rushing back to the car. So, and that's peaking at 240. The average, over the course of a 20-minute session is probably more like 180, 190, because we see very little difference between using a 150 kilowatt charger where they overvolt a little bit and you get to closer to 170, and the ones where you peak at 240. Great, it's great for the screenshots and the Instagrams, but realistically you're still done within 15-20 minutes. Does it really need to go significantly higher than what we already have?
Well, so first, hey Darren, what's up? Thanks for joining us. When I reviewed the Kia EV6, same exact experience as you. Like, I was the bottleneck at that point. Once you get charging below 15 to 20 minutes to get to 80%, I feel like the driver becomes the bottleneck. I'm sure there are some road warriors where that's fast enough. But when I think of that power creep, getting up to 350, 400, 450 kilowatt, I'm not thinking of it in terms of time, because I think that personally 200 to 300 kilowatt is more than fast enough for that 80 kilowatt hour class of battery, right? There's no reason to go faster, like you said, for an EGMP battery, for a Tesla battery, whatever. Once you get under 80, once you're about 80, 85 kilowatt and you're going over 250 to 300 kilowatt, there's no benefit, in my opinion.
Towing and
I'm thinking primarily of the bigger vehicles, the larger format vehicles where, a GMC Hummer EV, not the most efficient, but let's just say like the Dodge Ram EV or the Silverado EV, where these are 200, 220 kilowatt hour battery packs. Even at 350 kilowatt, you're still looking at 30 minutes or more to have a reasonable charging session, right? And so I think that power creep is appropriate for those vehicles specifically. But like you said, it's much like using a 350 kilowatt charger in your Hyundai Ioniq. It doesn't really make that much of a difference, right? I mean, it does about a 4 to 5 minute difference faster than 150 kilowatt, but it wouldn't change anything for you if it was a 400 kilowatt. You wouldn't go any faster, right? And a lot of vehicles are in that class. I'm driving one of them right now. The Bolt EV doesn't care if it's faster than 62.5 kilowatt. Makes no difference to me. It's all the same. So I think there's a reason for it, but it's not really to make charging sessions faster for the vehicles that are currently on the road today.
Yeah, so it's the kind of future proofing in the same way. We built out 350 kilowatt electrify locations when there were only Bolts and Leafs using them.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Let's see. I want to make sure we don't miss any comments. We have a couple of minutes left in the hour here. There you go. You might want to take this one from Darren.
Yeah.
If you have a kid or a dog, basically there's no benefit traveling.
Darren and I have talked about this a while too. Like, if you're traveling with a little puppy, they're going to need to use the bathroom, or if you have children, you're going to have bathroom breaks, and I want a snack, or did you find that my toy that's hidden somewhere in the back? And then hopefully when I send the kid back there, they can find my toys, but
it's buried.
But I mean, it's true. Like, people like I said, I think we've lost the human element in the EV discussions sometimes, is that people forget that it is people who are traveling. It's families, it's pets, it's, you're not just, why are you getting on the road and going 500, 600, 700 miles? It's not to prove how fast you can do it. Like, it might appear that way by some of the EV reviews that we see, but that's not how most people are traveling. They're not just looking to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible. There's a reason why you're traveling to grandma's house. So I think that's an important aspect of it, is these break times are necessary, and might as well. It's zero opportunity cost when you own an EV to stop for 20 minutes, right? And walk the dog. So
for sure. Let's see. Well, I think we covered a lot of it. Is there anything we missed on the kind of? Do we want to throw out some names of what this Super 7 network should be called? Give them some branding tips before we head out. Leave them in the chat here, and we'll pitch them. But if they get stolen, we can't guarantee you'll get a.
Throw out your ideas for the Super 7. But on that note, to close out,
screwed when the 8th comes along.
Yeah, exactly. Like I was going to say there, if you watch The Boys and you're irreverent television viewers, then yeah, the 7 is already good enough. I'll leave you to figure out who Homelander is, but but yeah, I think that was the question that I kind of had, is who else is going to join? Because it sounds like with the Tesla opening and the superchargers, they've been very vocal about almost recruiting, right? It's like, Hyundai, why don't you come with us, Hyundai? Why don't you join us? Why don't you join this open supercharger? And so I'm kind of curious with this charging alliance, who else is going to join? Because top on my list would be Lucid. Lucid hasn't really joined any of the other charging providers, and Peter Rawlinson is very clear about why would we use the superchargers right now when there's so little benefit for an 800-volt car like ours. So this is something where I could totally see Lucid jumping on board and saying, you know what, EVgo or Electrify America, we've already partnered with them, but now you're building out 800-volt infrastructure that would really work for our owners. Kind of like that Mercedes-Benz with, they're looking for that luxury experience as well. So yeah, I could see Lucid jumping on. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what other automakers maybe want to jump into this.
Yeah, they specifically have, and we know this because they've specifically called out founder members, right? There's an open doorway there for others to walk through if they want to. Tesla and the Swift 7 dwarves. How dare you?
Well, hey, just looking at the numbers, if they can execute, it will be 50% larger than the current supercharger network in North America right now.
Well, so there's the number resonates actually, because they're talking about 30,000 charges, and it's only marginally lower than the 32,000 that they quoted as being in the available right now. Obviously that's older tech that includes 50 kilowatts and 24 kilowatt stations, but it's it's doubling that, and with presumably all future-proofed 300, 350, 400 kilowatt hardware. So there we go, there's an interesting show. Toyota always late to the party, but maybe they've left themselves on the sidelines just at the right moment and to jump in at the last moment.
Now Toyota is also affiliated with EVgo, though, I believe.
They have the kind of Nissan like complementary sessions, right? But it's you need them with the BZ4X because you're going to be there a while. So
well, and then Nissan is another possibility too.
Alrighty, we have expired the hour and then some. I appreciate your time as always. Thank you so much for bringing out the topics, and I'm always happy to jump on. I don't know what your schedule looks like, but as we go forward, we should certainly consider whether this becomes a regular feature, and other people, there's plenty on this live chat that may be interested in joining. So give us a shout. Actually, that's a good plug and play ev@gmail.com if you want to email me, or just leave a comment down below. Maybe we'll get some more folks on this and we can start to build it out. But for now, it's the second one in the bag. I appreciate your time as always.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Thank you everybody for showing up. And then we gotta check out the Brian's video too that you mentioned. So.
Absolutely. I probably won't have a chance to put it in the live chat, that will expire, but I will make sure I put it as a pinned comment underneath this video. So you can either go and Google search Brian Ribby drives electric, or he may be linkable via his profile there. Look at that last EV road trip 5 tips videos. And he's also very amusing with his family. So you get some bonus comedy in there as well.
Yeah. Hey, Paul. Nice seeing you in the comments. So
everybody. Yeah. All right. Thanks again. Appreciate your time, and we will see you in the next one. Cheers.
Bye.